I never imagined that a few little notification bubbles could hurt so much. It was a gray Thursday morning in early March when my phone buzzed again, an incessant reminder that I wasn't welcome. I'd rolled over in bed, cheek pressed against the cool cotton of my pillowcase, dreaming of the weekend getaway my cousins had been teasing for months. They'd spent every holiday summer pushing the idea of renting that old cedar cabin on Lake Ridge, phone calls peppered with laughter and promises of long nights by the fire pit. I was the lone cousin, still single, still renting a cramped studio apartment in Seattle, still scraping by as a freelance graphic designer. But I never thought they'd actually leave me out. When I opened the group chat, Lake Ridge Legends, I saw 27 unread messages, all referencing dates and cabin plans. Memes about mosquitoes and marshmallows, inside jokes I'd never heard. No greetings, no hey, Harlow, Ewan, nothing. My heart sank in a familiar way. By the time I managed to drag myself out of bed and into my kitchen, gray light spilling across the linoleum floor, I felt smaller than the single-pane window, looking out onto the narrow alley between buildings. My hands trembled as I poured coffee into my favorite chipped mug, the one painted with tiny daisies that my grandmother gave me. When I was 19, memories drifted back, summer visits to Grandma's house in Snohomish, where Uncle Ryan and Aunt Melissa would coax me down to the dock and teach me how to bait a hook, or skip stones just right. We'd laugh until our sides ached, then trail back to the cabin for burgers and iced tea. That cabin felt like home, even if I never had the privacy of my own room. But last month, Mom told me the property's owner was selling. Family believed we could pool money together, a sort of cousin co-op, to keep the place in the clan. I'd said yes without hesitation. Now I realized they'd been texting each other behind my back, planning dates based on their own schedules, discussing budgets without bothering to CC me. My reflection in the stainless steel fridge door looked tired, even though I'd barely started my day. I'm 25, I thought. Too old to feel this petty, but the wound lay deeper. All my life, I'd been the odd one out, the bookish kid who wore hand-me-downs, the cousin who got braces just before prom, the aunt's little artist stuck in community college while everyone else finished university. Now I'd moved up to Seattle, scored a decent freelance gig making logos and layouts for tech startups, finally feeling like I had control over my life. Yet here I was, excluded from a cabin trip by blood relatives. My phone buzzed again, a new message: we should pick a weekend before rental prices skyrocket. I threw the phone onto the counter, the vibration rattling that chipped mug. I should feel angry. I should feel betrayed. Instead, I felt small, invisible. That afternoon, I slipped into my old pea coat, its pockets worn thin from years of carrying loose change, and headed out for a walk along Pine Street. The air was crisp, with a hint of drizzle, and I tucked my chin into my scarf, letting raindrops dot my lashes. Seattle felt moody as ever, the skyline blurred by mist. I wandered past coffee shops with chalkboard signs advertising oat milk lattes, past the art gallery where I'd had my first show last winter. My heels clicked on wet pavement as I replayed every family phone call from the past 6 months, trying to recall if I'd missed some secret invitation. I remembered Mom saying, "We'll loop you in soon," but soon had become never as I drifted past an open bookstore door, vinyl jazz music drifting out. I realized something. If they hadn't invited me, maybe the cabin would still be for sale. Maybe this exclusion was a blessing in disguise, a chance to claim that cherished place for myself. By the time I reached Green Lake, the rain had let up, leaving the sidewalk slick and shiny. Ducks paddled by the shoreline, their feathers glinting in the muted afternoon light. I found a bench beneath an alder tree and sat, pulling my phone back into my coat pocket. I reached for my journal, thin, leather-bound, pages scribbled with freelance deadlines and grocery lists, and wrote 3 words at the top of the page: by the cabin. It felt audacious, almost absurd. But my fingers barely paused as I sketched an outline of potential plans: find out the listing price, figure out financing, research the property's history. My heart raced as my mind inventoried assets I'd never considered. A small inheritance gift from Grandma, savings I'd stashed away after landing that big design contract, a solid credit score bolstered by years of timely student loan payments. For once, my past choices seemed like stepping stones instead of setbacks. That night, I sat at my desk in my apartment, the single overhead bulb casting a small pool of light over my laptop. I opened a new browser window and typed Lake Ridge cabin for sale. My breath hitched when I saw the listing price, lower than I expected. Thanks to the seller's desire to unload the place quickly, the photos were familiar: a wraparound porch with timber railings, tall pines crowding the perimeter, the lake's glassy surface reflecting the dawn. I clicked through each image, feeling a surge of ownership intensify with every scroll. I calculated mortgage rates, sliding numbers, into a spreadsheet I'd cobbled together at midnight. Every figure told me I could do this. Not only could I afford it, but I could also make it mine. No more babysitting my cousins' itineraries, or watching them chuckle about canoe rentals. I leaned back in my chair, a slow smile spreading across my face. I imagined stepping onto that porch next summer, breathing pine-scented air without asking permission, hosting friends or clients in a sunlit living room with tall windows. I imagined sending my cousins a simple text, "Thanks for the inspo, bought the cabin, see you there?" My pulse thumped with excitement and a touch of righteous satisfaction. I felt that old ache of exclusion dissolve, replaced by something fierce and determined. Tomorrow, I decided, I'd call the real estate agent. I'd arrange a viewing, get pre-approved for the loan, sign on the dotted line. They might have made that group chat without me, but I was about to make a move that would leave them speechless. And for the first time in a long time, I couldn't wait to see their faces when they realized I'd beaten them at their own game. I woke up the next morning, with my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst through my chest. I brewed a strong cup of coffee while my laptop warmed up, and I hesitated for a moment before dialing the real estate agent's number. My fingers trembled as I tapped the phone icon. "Hello, this is Emma Harlow," I said, using my full name because it felt momentous. "I'm calling about the Lake Ridge cabin listing." The agent, a calm woman named Lorraine, walked me through the basics: list price, inspection report status, current offers. I scribbled notes in my favorite floral notebook, the one I kept tucked in my messenger bag. Lorraine sounded surprised when I mentioned I wanted to see the place as soon as possible, but she obliged, securing an afternoon slot in 3 days. After I hung up, I leaned back in my chair and exhaled slowly, my chest aching with excitement and nerves. Over the next 2 days, I prepared obsessively. I printed my credit report, collected bank statements, and spoke with a mortgage broker, who ran scenarios faster than I could process. By the evening before the showing, I'd memorized every square foot and amenity listed online. I even drafted a budget for repairs: fresh paint on the walls, refinishing the hardwood floors in the living area, installing a new wood stove for chilly evenings. It felt like planning a dream, but I knew I'd have to temper my expectations in case another offer came in. The morning of the showing felt surreal. I drove east from Seattle, the freeway gradually giving way to winding two-lane roads flanked by towering evergreens. Rain clouds lingered overhead, casting the landscape in muted greens and grays. My rental Corolla rumbled as I hugged the curves, and I played the same playlist on repeat, songs about open roads and second chances. When I turned onto Cedar Lane, a narrow gravel drive, my breath caught. There it stood, just as the listing photos promised, a sturdy log cabin with a moss-covered roof, smoke curling from the chimney. I parked, grabbed my umbrella, and stepped onto the porch. The wood creaked under my weight and pine needles crackled beneath my boots. The front door was unlocked and Lorraine greeted me with a warm smile. She flicked on the light and ushered me inside. The air smelled of cedar and wood smoke, and shafts of afternoon sun filtered through lace curtains. I sighed, closing my eyes for a moment, picturing myself curled up on the couch with a blanket and a book. For a heartbeat, it felt like home. We walked from room to room. The kitchen was small but charming, with retro blue cabinets and a crackling propane stove. Lorraine pointed out that the fridge needed repair and the sink faucet dripped, but nothing a local handyman couldn't fix. The living room had high ceilings supported by exposed beams, and a wood-burning fireplace dominated one wall. In the master bedroom, the view of the lake through a curved window stole my breath again. I placed a hand on the sill, imagining morning coffee steaming in my hands as loons called across the water. Back outside, Lorraine asked if I planned to make an offer. My heart thumped. I nodded, blinking back moisture. "Yes," I said softly, "I'll submit a pre-approval letter today." She smiled and handed me a brochure listing comparable sales in the area. One had sold for $15,000 more than the asking price, but it lacked water access. Another was renovated to look modern, but I preferred rustic authenticity. I closed the brochure and typed a quick email to my mortgage broker, loan estimate attached. Ready to move forward, my finger hovered over send until I reminded myself how far I'd come. The next 48 hours were a blur of paperwork. I signed disclosures, uploaded bank statements, and pledged earnest money to demonstrate serious intent. The seller's attorney reviewed my documents, then nodded in approval, sending my offer up the chain. I watched my email like a hawk, every notification ping sending adrenaline surges through my veins. When Lorraine forwarded me the acceptance letter, my vision blurred and tears threatened. I sat on my living room floor, laptop on my knees, and laughed in disbelief. I had done it. I had bought the cabin. Celebration was short-lived, however, when I saw a new message pop into the Lake Ridge Legends chat, a gif of confetti, and the words, "Congratulations, Harlow." I stared at the screen, thumb hovering, uncertain whether to reply. My cousins flooded the thread with excited emojis and demands to see pictures. A pang of guilt stabbed me. I'd planned to surprise them. But the ferocity of my win made me hesitate. What if they felt resentful? What if this ripped our family bond instead of mending old wounds? I took a deep breath and typed a simple response, thanks, more to share soon. Then I shut my phone. That weekend, I returned to Lake Ridge to finalize the closing. I signed papers, handed over the down payment, and held the keys. Their metal weight thrilling in my palm, standing in the clearing. I watched sunlight weave through pines, reflecting off the lake. Ownership was only the beginning. Now I had to prove I deserved this place and could honor its history with care. The first night in the cabin was colder than I'd imagined. After closing, Lorraine had shown me how to light the old wood stove, and I spent an hour stacking logs just right. Inhaling that comforting, spicy scent, I made myself a cup of chamomile tea in the tiny kitchen and settled into the living room outside. Moonlight glimmered across the lake, the pines whispered with each breeze. For a moment, I felt we were the only two witnesses to this place, the cabin and me, bound together by its history and my new ownership. Sleep came in fitful waves, punctuated by the groan of settling logs and the distant yip of a fox. Morning light crept in through the lace curtains, and I woke to birdsong and the faint aroma of pine needles warming in the sun. My phone lay silent on the countertop. I'd ignored it deliberately, so I took my time brewing coffee on the old stove. Outside, mist hovered above the lake like a gauzy veil, inhaling the damp, woodsy air. I realized that alone here, I'd have to learn everything from scratch: how to winterize the cabin where the nearest hardware store was, how to replace the propane tank. Back in Seattle, I'd been adept at digital deadlines and design proofs. But rural homeownership demanded a different skill set. After breakfast, I ventured through the cabin's hidden nooks, jotting down notes for renovations. The master bedrooms carpet was threadbare, the bathroom sink drained slowly, the screen door to the porch hung crooked. Despite this, each flaw felt endearing, like quirks of an old friend. I snapped photos and sent them to my contractor back home, already picturing fresh paint and soothing neutrals and new fixtures that would maintain the cabin's rustic charm. That afternoon, I drove into the nearest town, an unassuming cluster of storefronts with hand-painted signs advertising Miller's Hardware and Feed and Lydia's Diner. At Miller's, the clerk, a burly man named George, greeted me with a knowing nod. "You must be the new owner of the Cedar Cabin." He handed me a faded local newsletter warning of early snow and offered to deliver firewood weekly. I felt a swell of pride. I wasn't just a visitor, I was part of this community now. At Lydia's, I ordered a turkey club sandwich and coffee. Locals eyed me curiously, and I realized I'd become the talk of town when I mentioned the cabin. The waitress, whose name I'd read Cindy, marveled. "I heard that place sat empty for months. Good on you for taking it on." I felt both celebrated and exposed. In Seattle, I could fade into anonymity. Here, everyone knew my name. Back at the cabin, I unpacked a battered box of family photos I'd brought from home, images of Grandma's 70th birthday celebrated on that very porch, cousins splashing in the lake, Christmas mornings by the fireplace. For the first time, I could preserve these memories on my own terms, gently. I arranged the photos across the mantel above the hearth, anchoring my lineage in the space I now owned. That evening, I rejoined the Lake Ridge Legends group chat. This time on my own terms, I posted a picture of the living room, honeyed wood beams, lace curtains backlit by twilight, the hearth crackling. "Welcome to your cabin, Harlow." Read one reply from my cousin Maya, followed by a thumbs up from Lucas. Messages flooded in. "Can't believe you did it. Let's plan the first cousin weekend. Will there be room for tents?" My chest tightened at the eagerness in their words. They wanted to share it now. I paused before typing. I could choose to see this as their chance to stitch me back into the family fold, or I could feel used, that they only cared once I held the keys. I reminded myself that leadership often meant setting boundaries. But despite my initial fury, I missed those summers on that porch, the laughter echoing across the water. With a soft exhale, I tapped out. "Absolutely. Let's plan a weekend in August. I'll handle the cabin, you handle the snacks and games." Immediately, cousins began suggesting dates. Maya insisted on the second weekend, Marcus argued for the third. I opened my journal and drew 3 columns: dates, guest count, supply list, and sent a photo. "Pick your weekend," I wrote. "Final call by next week." I lingered over the send button, then released it. The next morning, the sun rose, crisp and clear. I stepped onto the deck with my tea, feeling a gentle resolve. Owning this cabin wasn't about revenge, it was about forging a space where I belonged, where future memories would include every cousin, every inside joke, every late-night confession by the fire. My gaze swept across the lake, and I realized I was no longer the smallest cousin, the odd one out. Here, I was the steward of our shared history and the architect of new traditions. There was work ahead, repairs, snow preparations, landscaping, but also joy, planning cousin cookouts, fishing trips, card games by candlelight. And when that August weekend arrived, I'd be ready. I'd open the cabin's doors wide and welcome them not as gate crashers, but as cherished guests in a home I'd fought to make mine. The cabin's next chapter was just beginning, and I couldn't wait to write it alongside the people who once left me out and now would fill every room with laughter and life again.